My husband thought he could steal my multi-million-dollar solar technology patents and sell them to his girlfriend's company. What he didn't know was that I had been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. And when the FBI Intellectual Property Division called, his whole world came crashing down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah, and I'm a renewable energy engineer who specializes in photovoltaic systems. At 32, I had already spent the better part of a decade perfecting what would become the most efficient solar panel design in the industry. But this story isn't just about scientific breakthroughs or corporate espionage. It's about discovering that the person sleeping next to you every night can be plotting against you in ways you never imagined possible. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in March. I was sitting at my kitchen table in our modest 2-story home in Aurora, Colorado, reviewing my presentation notes for what I believed would be the most important meeting of my career. Sunlight filtered through our bay window, hitting the small prototype solar panel I kept on the windowsill as a reminder of how far I'd come. The irony wasn't lost on me that this little panel, no bigger than a tablet, could generate enough power to run our coffee maker, and soon panels like it would be transforming the renewable energy industry forever. David, my husband of 7 years, was making his usual morning smoothie, the blender drowning out the quiet hum of my laptop fan. He looked handsome as always in his tailored navy suit, preparing for another day at Fletcher Marketing Solutions, where he managed campaigns for tech startups. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he had that confident smile that had first attracted me when we met at a university mixer during my graduate studies. Back then, he seemed genuinely fascinated by my research, asking thoughtful questions about semiconductor efficiency and renewable energy applications. He made me feel like my work mattered, like I wasn't just another nerdy engineer boring people with technical jargon. "Big day today, babe," he said, walking over to kiss the top of my head. His cologne was expensive, something new he'd started wearing in recent months. "Are you ready to change the world with those magical solar panels of yours?" I smiled up at him, feeling that familiar flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. As ready as I'll ever be. 4 years of research, and it all comes down to this presentation. "You're going to blow them away," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "I know it. This technology is revolutionary, Sarah. The efficiency rates you've achieved are unprecedented." What struck me as odd, though I didn't think much of it at the time, was how technically knowledgeable he'd become about my work. David had a business degree and had always been supportive, but lately he'd been asking very specific questions about my algorithms, my testing methodologies, even the patent filing process. When I'd mentioned it to my best friend Rachel, she'd laughed and said he was probably just trying to be a good husband by taking interest in my career. The conference room at Green Tech Solutions was exactly what you'd expect from a cutting-edge renewable energy company trying to make an impression. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains, while sleek glass tables and modern ergonomic chairs suggested a company that invested in both aesthetics and employee comfort. The walls were adorned with awards and certifications, testament to their position as one of Colorado's leading clean energy innovators. I had arrived 30 minutes early, partly out of nervousness and partly because I wanted to test all the presentation equipment beforehand. My prototype panels were carefully packed in a specialized carrying case, along with my laptop containing 4 years' worth of research, development notes, and most importantly, the proprietary algorithms that made my technology so revolutionary. These weren't just incremental improvements to existing solar technology. I had discovered a way to increase photovoltaic efficiency by nearly 40% while reducing manufacturing costs by 25%. In an industry where even 5% improvements were considered significant, my breakthrough was nothing short of revolutionary. The other attendees began filtering in around 9:30. I recognized several faces from industry publications and conferences. Dr. Michael Harrison, GreenTech's CEO, was a tall man in his 50s with graying temples and an authoritative presence that commanded respect. He'd built GreenTech from a small startup into a major player in the renewable energy sector over the past 15 years. Beside him sat Jennifer Walsh, their chief financial officer, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could calculate profit margins in her sleep. The rest of the team included various department heads and senior engineers, all people whose opinions could make or break my future in this industry. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Dr. Harrison said, extending his hand as I stood, to greet the group. We've been looking forward to this presentation for weeks. Your preliminary data is quite impressive. Thank you, Dr. Harrison. I'm excited to share what I've been working on. As the meeting began, I felt that familiar surge of confidence that came whenever I talked about my research. This was my element, my passion, the thing I'd devoted my entire adult life to perfecting. I'd given hundreds of presentations over the years, from small academic conferences to major industry symposiums, but none had felt as important as this one. GreenTech had the manufacturing capabilities and market reach to bring my technology to the masses, something I could never accomplish working alone from my home laboratory. The presentation was going beautifully. I could see the excitement in their eyes as I explained the breakthrough in electron mobility that made my higher efficiency rates possible. When I demonstrated the prototype panels, showing real-time energy, generation data that exceeded their expectations, several attendees actually gasped. Dr. Harrison leaned forward in his chair, clearly impressed by what he was seeing. "This is remarkable work, Dr. Martinez," he said during a brief pause. "The applications for this technology are enormous. We're talking about the potential to revolutionize the entire solar industry." I felt a surge of pride and relief. Months of sleepless nights, countless iterations and failed experiments, thousands of dollars of my own money invested in equipment and materials. It was all paying off. This was the validation I'd been working toward, the moment when my research would transition from academic curiosity to real-world impact. But then something shifted in the room's energy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Harrison's expression changed, becoming more formal, more businesslike. He glanced at his watch and then at the other attendees before clearing his throat. "Dr. Martinez, your work is certainly impressive, and we appreciate you taking the time to present to us today. However, I'm afraid we've recently acquired technology that's quite similar to what you're proposing." My stomach dropped. Similar technology? That was impossible. I'd spent years researching every patent, every published paper, every development in photovoltaic efficiency. My approach was entirely novel, based on a unique understanding of semiconductor physics that I'd developed through years of original research. "I'm not sure I understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Could you clarify what you mean by similar technology?" Dr. Harrison smiled, but it wasn't the warm, encouraging smile he'd worn throughout my presentation. This was the polite, but distant smile of someone delivering disappointing news. "We've just brought on a new chief technology officer who has developed a remarkably similar approach to improving solar panel efficiency. In fact, her work appears to be even more advanced than what you've shown us today." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Another researcher with similar work? The odds were astronomical. Solar efficiency improvements at this level required not just technical knowledge, but also intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics and materials science that took years to develop. It wasn't the kind of breakthrough that multiple people stumbled upon simultaneously. "I'd be very interested to learn more about this other research," I said carefully. "Perhaps we could explore collaboration opportunities, or at least ensure that our respective patents don't conflict." "Actually," Dr. Harrison said, standing up and walking toward the conference room door, "I think it would be helpful if you met our new CTO directly. Dr. Amanda Chen, would you please join us?" The door opened, and my world collapsed. Amanda. Chen walked into the conference room with the confident stride of someone who owned the space. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other women simultaneously admire and resent her, with long black hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail and wearing an expensive-looking charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. But it wasn't her appearance that made my blood turn to ice. It was the fact that I recognized her immediately. This was David's Amanda, the marketing consultant he'd been working with on various projects over the past 6 months, the woman whose name had been coming up more and more frequently in our dinner conversations, the person he'd been texting late at night, claiming it was work-related, the reason he'd been working late so many evenings, supposedly collaborating on campaigns for tech clients. "Dr. Martinez," Amanda said, extending her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. David has told me so much about your work." David. She said his name like they were close friends, like she had every right to discuss my husband and my research in the same breath. My hand moved automatically to shake hers, but my mind was racing. How did she know David well enough to discuss my work with him? And more importantly, why was she here, in this conference room, being introduced as Green Tech's new Chief Technology Officer? Dr. Chen has been developing revolutionary improvements to photovoltaic efficiency, Dr. Harrison continued, oblivious to the personal drama unfolding in his conference room. Her approach is quite innovative, achieving efficiency rates that exceed current industry standards by nearly 40%. 40%, the exact same improvement rate I'd achieved. The exact same rate I'd shared with David during countless evening conversations about my research progress. Amanda opened her laptop and began setting up her own presentation. "I'm excited to share what I've been working on," she said, connecting her computer to the same projector I'd used just minutes earlier. "This technology represents years of dedicated research into semiconductor physics and quantum efficiency optimization." She clicked to her first slide, and my heart stopped. The diagram on the screen was identical to one I'd developed 18 months ago. Not similar, not inspired by, identical. The same quantum efficiency curves, the same electron mobility calculations, even the same color scheme and font choices I'd used in my own research presentations. "As you can see," Amanda continued, "the key breakthrough involves manipulating electron behavior at the quantum level to reduce energy loss during photon conversion." Those were my words, not paraphrased or summarized, but my exact technical explanation, delivered in the same order I'd presented it to David when I'd finally cracked the efficiency problem. I sat frozen in my chair, watching this woman present 4 years of my life's work as if she'd conceived every innovation herself. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes, each slide a knife twist in my chest. My proprietary algorithms, presented as her original research. My testing methodologies, claimed as her innovative approach. My manufacturing cost analysis, offered as her business insight. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, for being stolen right in front of me by someone who probably couldn't explain the basic physics behind photovoltaic cells. "The market applications are enormous," Amanda concluded, echoing phrases I'd used in my own presentation less than an hour earlier. "We're looking at potential revenue streams in the billions, with manufacturing partnerships that could bring this technology to market within 18 months. Dr. Harrison and the other green tech executives were visibly impressed. They asked technical questions that Amanda answered with confidence, using explanations that I recognized as variations of conversations I'd had with David at our kitchen table. She had clearly been well coached, probably by someone who had intimate access to my research, and could help her prepare for exactly these kinds of detailed inquiries. "This is extraordinary work, Dr. Chen," Dr. Harrison said as the presentation concluded. "The potential for this technology is unprecedented. We're looking forward to moving ahead with development and manufacturing partnerships." I sat in stunned silence as the meeting concluded, watching Amanda accept congratulations and praise for work that belonged to me. The other attendees filed out of the conference room, discussing implementation timelines and market strategies, while I remained seated, trying to process what had just happened. Amanda lingered as the room emptied, finally approaching me with that same cold smile. "Sarah, I hope there are no hard feelings," she said quietly, so only I could hear. "Business is business, after all. Sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places." She knew. She knew exactly what she'd done, and she didn't care. Worse, she was taunting me with it, confident that I couldn't or wouldn't do anything to stop her. "How?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "How what?" she replied innocently. "How did you get my research?" Amanda's smile widened slightly. "Your research? I think you might be confused, Sarah. This is my original work, developed over several years of dedicated study. I hope you can understand why green tech would choose to partner with the actual innovator, rather than someone presenting derivative work." Derivative work? She was actually trying to make it seem like I had copied her, when she had stolen everything from me down to the font choices in my slides. As Amanda walked away, I finally understood the full scope of what had happened. This wasn't just corporate espionage or a competitor trying to steal trade secrets. This was personal. This was my husband, the man I'd shared my life with for 7 years, systematically betraying me in the most devastating way possible. He hadn't just sold my research, he'd sold our marriage, our trust, our future together. I sat alone in that conference room for several minutes, staring at the blank wall where my hopes and dreams had just been shattered. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something else started building inside me. Not sadness, not self-pity, but cold, calculating anger. If David and Amanda thought they could steal my life's work and get away with it, they had seriously underestimated who they were dealing with. I was Dr. Sarah Martinez, and I hadn't spent 4 years revolutionizing solar technology by giving up when things got difficult. I'd built something extraordinary through determination, intelligence, and relentless hard work. And I was about to show them exactly what happens when you try to steal from someone who's smarter than you think. The drive home was a blur of Colorado highway and racing thoughts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had already begun formulating a plan. David's car wasn't there, which was perfect. I needed time to think, to gather evidence, and to prepare for what was coming next. Inside our house, everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but nothing felt the same. The kitchen where David had made his smoothie and kissed, my head now felt like a crime scene. The living room where we'd spent countless evenings discussing my research now seemed like an interrogation room where I'd unknowingly provided my husband with everything he needed to destroy me. I walked straight to my home office, a converted bedroom where I'd spent thousands of hours perfecting my solar technology. My computers, my research notes, my prototype equipment, everything was exactly as I'd left it. But now I realized that David had had unlimited access to all of it. Every late night when I'd fallen asleep at my desk, every weekend when I'd left to run errands, every moment when I'd trusted him with the most important work of my life. But as I sat down at my computer and began reviewing my files, I realized something that made me smile for the first time all day. David might have been able to steal my research, but he didn't understand how I worked. He didn't know about the backup systems I'd implemented, the detailed logs I kept of every development, milestone, or the security measures I'd put in place to protect my intellectual property. Most importantly, he didn't know that I had been documenting everything all along, including his own involvement in my research, his access to my files, and his increasingly suspicious behavior over the past several months. If David wanted to play games with my life's work, I was about to show him how a real scientist approaches problem solving, methodically, carefully, and with devastating precision. That evening, as I waited for David to come home, I found myself revisiting memories that now carried entirely different meanings. Our relationship hadn't always been complicated by lies and betrayal. When we first met at the University of Colorado's annual research symposium 8 years ago, David had been genuinely impressed by my presentation on emerging photovoltaic technologies. He was there representing his graduate marketing program, tasked with identifying promising technologies that could benefit from better commercial positioning. After my presentation, he approached me with thoughtful questions that went beyond the typical superficial inquiries I usually received from business students. He wanted to understand not just what my research could accomplish, but why it mattered on a global scale. We spent 3 hours in the university coffee shop that first day, talking about everything from climate change to semiconductor physics to the challenges of bringing laboratory innovations to real-world applications. David had a way of making me feel like my work was important, like it had value beyond academic achievement. As someone who had spent most of graduate school feeling isolated by my technical focus, his genuine interest in my research was intoxicating. He didn't just nod politely when I explained complex concepts. He asked follow-up questions, made connections I hadn't considered, and helped me articulate the broader implications of my work in ways that non-scientists could understand. Our courtship revolved around my research in ways that seemed romantic at the time, but now felt calculated and predatory. He would bring me dinner during long laboratory sessions, sitting quietly while I worked and asking occasional questions about my progress. He helped me prepare for conferences, listening to practice presentations and offering suggestions for making technical concepts more accessible. When I received my PhD, he was the first person I called, and his excitement seemed as genuine as my own. The early years of our marriage were built around supporting my career development. David had landed a position at Fletcher Marketing Solutions right after graduation, specializing in technology sector clients, while I pursued postdoctoral research opportunities. He encouraged me to take risks, to pursue the most challenging projects, to push the boundaries of what was considered possible in renewable energy technology. When I decided to leave my university position to focus on independent research, he was completely supportive, even though it meant financial uncertainty for both of us. For the first 3 years of our marriage, David seemed genuinely proud of my accomplishments. He would bring colleagues to industry events where I was speaking, introducing me as his brilliant wife who was going to revolutionize solar energy. He learned enough about photovoltaic technology to hold basic conversations with my peers, and he often provided valuable insights about market positioning and commercial viability that helped me refine my research focus. The transition to working from our home laboratory had been David's idea. He argued that the overhead costs of renting laboratory space were eating into our savings, and that I could accomplish just as much working from a converted garage as I could in a formal research facility. He helped me design the layout, sourcing equipment, and creating organizational systems that maximized efficiency in the limited space. For months, he would check on my progress every evening, bringing coffee and asking detailed questions about my latest experiments. Looking back now, I realized that David's interest in my work had gradually shifted from supportive curiosity to systematic information gathering. The casual questions about my methodology had become more specific, more technical, more focused, on details that would be valuable to someone trying to replicate my research. His help with administrative tasks had given him complete access to my filing systems, my patent applications, my correspondence with potential investors and manufacturing partners. The most insidious part of his betrayal was how gradually it had developed. There was no single moment when I could point to David's behavior and identify it as suspicious or threatening. Instead, he had slowly, methodically positioned himself to have complete access to every aspect of my professional life while maintaining the facade of a supportive husband. He knew my research better than most of my colleagues did, not because he was genuinely interested in science, but because he was planning to steal it. Amanda Chen's involvement had been similarly gradual and seemingly innocent. David first mentioned her about 8 months ago, describing her as a brilliant marketing consultant who specialized in technology companies. He was working with her on a campaign for a blockchain startup, and he often spoke admiringly of her strategic thinking and innovative approaches to market positioning. She had an MBA from Stanford and extensive experience in the tech sector, according to David, making her exactly the kind of professional contact that could benefit both of our careers. Over the following months, Amanda's name came up more and more frequently in David's conversations. She was helping him develop more sophisticated approaches to technology marketing. She had connections with venture capital firms and angel investors. She understood the renewable energy sector better than most marketing professionals. She was interested in meeting me, David said, because she was fascinated by breakthrough technologies and thought my research had enormous commercial potential. The first time I met Amanda was at a networking event for Colorado tech professionals. David had suggested we attend together, claiming it would be a good opportunity for me to make industry connections outside of the academic and research communities where I usually spent my time. Amanda was everything David had described, and more. Sophisticated, articulate, clearly successful, and genuinely knowledgeable about technology markets. She sought me out during the cocktail reception, introducing herself as David's colleague and expressing sincere interest in my solar efficiency research. Her questions were intelligent and well-informed, demonstrating a level of technical understanding. That impressed me. She asked about manufacturing scalability, potential licensing opportunities, and market penetration strategies, all topics that I had been wrestling with as I tried to transition from research to commercialization. What struck me most about that first conversation with Amanda was how much she already knew about my work. She referenced specific efficiency improvements I had achieved, manufacturing cost analyses I had developed, even timeline projections I had shared only with David. At the time, I assumed he had been talking about my research in positive terms with his professional contacts, helping to build market awareness and interest. Now I understood that he had been systematically briefing her on every detail of my project, preparing her to eventually claim my innovations as her own. Over the subsequent months, Amanda and I had developed what I thought was a genuine professional relationship. She would occasionally text me articles about renewable energy trends or venture capital funding patterns that she thought might interest me. She invited me to industry panels and networking events where she thought I could make valuable connections. She even offered to help me develop marketing materials for my technology, claiming that her expertise in positioning complex innovations could help me attract investor interest. The most damaging aspect of Amanda's involvement was how she had used our developing friendship to gain even deeper access to my research. During several of our conversations, she had asked detailed questions about my methodology, claiming she needed to understand the technical aspects in order to help me communicate with potential investors. She had reviewed my patent applications, offering suggestions for strengthening the commercial language and market positioning. She had even visited our home laboratory, ostensibly to better understand my development process so she could help me articulate it to non-technical audiences. Every interaction I had with Amanda now seemed like a reconnaissance mission, designed to extract maximum information about my research while building the trust and familiarity that would make her eventual betrayal more devastating. She hadn't just stolen my technology. She had stolen my friendship, my professional confidence, and my ability to trust my own judgment about people's motivations. The financial implications of what David and Amanda had done were staggering. My solar efficiency technology represented not just 4 years of research and development, but potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in licensing revenue, manufacturing partnerships, and market opportunities. The renewable energy sector was experiencing unprecedented growth, driven by government incentives, environmental concerns, and rapidly improving cost-effectiveness of clean technologies. My breakthrough could have positioned me as a major player in this expanding market, providing financial security and professional recognition that would have transformed our lives. Instead, David had essentially sold our future to finance his relationship with another woman. The technology that should have guaranteed our financial independence had become the foundation of someone else's career and wealth. Amanda would receive the recognition, the consulting opportunities, the board positions, and the industry influence that should have been mine. She would build her professional reputation on innovations that had cost me years of my life and thousands of dollars of personal investment. But beyond the financial betrayal was the deeper violation of trust that cut to the core of our marriage. David hadn't just stolen my research. He had systematically deceived me about the most fundamental aspects of our relationship. Every supportive comment, every encouraging gesture, every moment of apparent partnership had been contaminated by his hidden agenda. He had weaponized my love and trust against me, using the intimacy of marriage to gain access to information and opportunities that he then used to destroy my career. As I sat in our living room that evening, surrounded by the familiar objects and photographs that represented 7 years of shared life, I felt like I was seeing everything clearly for the first time. The expensive cologne David had started wearing, the new clothes that seemed beyond what his salary at Fletcher Marketing could support, the late-night text messages he claimed were work-related, the business trips that had become more frequent and mysterious, the subtle changes in how he talked about our future together, always vague and non-committal about long-term plans. All of it made sense now. David hadn't just been having an affair. He had been systematically dismantling our marriage while planning his transition to a new life funded by my stolen intellectual property. He had been living a double life so completely that I wondered if I had ever really known him at all, or if our entire relationship had been built on his ability to manipulate my emotions and exploit my professional achievements. The sound of David's key in the front door interrupted my dark reflections. I had been dreading this moment all afternoon, unsure how to confront him about what I had discovered. But as I heard his footsteps in the hallway, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The uncertainty was over. The truth was finally revealed. Now I needed to understand exactly how much damage had been done and what options I had for fighting back. David walked into the living room carrying takeout bags from our favorite Thai restaurant, smiling as if this were any other evening in our normal, happy marriage. "I thought we should celebrate your big presentation today," he said, setting the food on our coffee table. "How did it go at Green Tech? Did they love your technology? As much as I knew they would?" The casual cruelty of his question took my breath away. He was actually going to pretend that he didn't know exactly how the presentation had gone, that he hadn't orchestrated the entire devastating experience. He was going to sit there and eat dinner with me while pretending to care about my feelings, all while knowing that he had just destroyed everything I had worked for. "It was interesting," I said carefully, watching his face for any sign of guilt or nervousness. "Very educational." "That's great, babe. I can't wait to hear all about it." Did they seem excited about the efficiency improvements? I know you've been worried about whether they would understand the commercial potential. David's performance was flawless. His expression showed exactly the right mixture of curiosity and supportive concern. If I hadn't seen Amanda presenting my research just hours earlier, I might have believed that he was genuinely interested in my professional success, rather than mining me for information about how his conspiracy was progressing. "They were definitely interested in the technology," I said. "In fact, they seemed very familiar with it, almost like they had seen similar research before." For just a moment, David's expression flickered. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I caught a brief flash of something that might have been anxiety or calculation before his supportive smile returned. "Well, that's not surprising," he said. "Solar efficiency is a hot topic right now. Lots of companies are working on similar problems. The important thing is that your approach is superior to anything else out there." Actually, they said they had just hired a new chief technology officer who had developed remarkably similar technology, even more advanced than mine, according to their CEO. David's hand paused for just a fraction of a second as he reached for the takeout containers. Really? That's unfortunate timing. Did you get to meet this other researcher? I did. Her name is Amanda Chen. Do you know her? This time, David's reaction was more obvious. His entire body tensed slightly, and he took a moment too long to respond. When he finally looked up at me, I could see him calculating how much I might know and how he should handle the situation. Amanda Chen. The name sounds familiar. I think I might have worked with someone by that name on a project at Fletcher. Small world, I guess. Small world indeed. She seemed to know quite a bit about you. She mentioned that you had told her about my research. David set down the takeout container and looked directly at me for the first time since coming home. I could see him trying to gauge whether this was casual conversation or a more serious confrontation. Sarah, what's going on? You seem upset about something. I'm trying to understand how Amanda Chen ended up presenting my exact research to the same company where I was hoping to license my technology. I'm trying to understand how she had access to my proprietary algorithms, my testing data, even my presentation formatting. And I'm trying to understand how my husband's marketing colleague became the chief technology officer of a renewable energy company, presenting innovations that I developed in our home laboratory. The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at me for what felt like an eternity, and I could practically see him running through possible explanations, calculating which lies might still be believable, trying to determine how much evidence I actually had. Finally, he sighed and ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I had always found endearing, but now seemed like a calculated display of vulnerability. Sarah, I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. Then please explain it. To me, David. Explain how the woman you've been having an affair with ended up stealing 4 years of my research and presenting it as her own work. Explain how my husband helped engineer the destruction of my career so he could start a new life with someone else. Please, explain it all to me. David's face went white. Whatever story he had been preparing to tell, my direct confrontation had caught him off guard. He had expected to be able to continue manipulating the situation, controlling the narrative, managing my emotions while protecting his own interests. Instead, he was faced with the reality that I knew everything and was demanding accountability. Sarah, please, let me explain. Amanda and we didn't plan for this to happen. We met through work and we connected, but we never meant for it to become personal. And the research thing, that was her idea. She said that your technology had so much potential, and that GreenTech was the perfect company to bring it to market. But she knew they would never take it seriously coming from an independent researcher, with no industry connections. So you decided to steal it instead. We didn't steal it. We adapted it. We refined it. Amanda has connections and experience that you don't have. She knows how to navigate corporate environments, how to present technical concepts to business audiences, how to structure deals that maximize value for everyone involved. David was actually trying to make their betrayal sound like they were doing me a favor. Like stealing my life's work was somehow an act of professional mentorship designed to help me succeed in ways I couldn't accomplish on my own. David, those were my algorithms, my testing protocols, my efficiency calculations, my patent applications. Amanda didn't adapt or refine anything. She stole my research and presented it as her own original work. But she's going to make sure you're compensated. This isn't about cutting you out, Sarah. It's about making sure your technology reaches its full potential. Amanda has already talked to GreenTech about bringing you on as a consultant once the initial development phase is complete. The audacity of his explanation was breathtaking. He was suggesting that I should be grateful for the opportunity to work as a consultant on my own stolen research, reporting to the woman who had destroyed my career and stolen my husband. David, do you understand what you've done? Do you understand that intellectual property theft is a federal crime? Do you understand that you've destroyed our marriage, my career, and any possibility of trust between us? Sarah, please. You're being dramatic about this. Amanda and I have feelings for each other, yes, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you or your future. We can work this out. We can find a solution that benefits everyone. A solution that benefits everyone? David, the solution that would have benefited everyone was for you to not steal my research and give it to your girlfriend. The solution that would have benefited everyone was for you to not systematically betray everything our marriage was supposed to represent. David stood up and began pacing around our living room, clearly agitated by my refusal to accept his version of events. Sarah, you're not seeing the big picture here. Amanda has connections that could take your technology global. She has experience that could make this worth millions of dollars instead of the thousands you might have made licensing it to some small company. She's offering you opportunities that you never could have created on your own. She's offering me opportunities to benefit from my own stolen work. She's offering me the chance to watch someone else get rich and famous from innovations that I created. She's offering me the privilege of being grateful for whatever scraps she decides to throw my way. It doesn't have to be scraps, Sarah. Amanda wants to make this right. She wants to make sure you're taken care of. Amanda wants to make sure I don't cause problems for her new career built on my stolen research. Amanda wants to make sure I don't report her for intellectual property theft. Amanda wants me to disappear quietly so she can enjoy the success and recognition that should have been mine. David stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was cold, calculating, almost threatening. For the first time in our 7-year marriage, I felt genuinely afraid of my husband. Sarah, you need to be very careful about what you do next. Amanda has connections throughout the industry. She has lawyers, investors, people who can make your life very difficult if you try to cause problems. You don't want to make enemies of people who have the power to destroy what's left of your career. What's left of my career? David, there is no career left. You and Amanda have already destroyed it. You've stolen everything I worked for and given it to someone else. There is nothing left for anyone to destroy. There's always more that can be taken away, Sarah. There's your reputation, your professional relationships, your ability to work in this industry at all. Amanda has already begun positioning your research as derivative work based on her original innovations. If you try to fight this, she'll make sure that everyone in the renewable energy sector knows that you're a disgruntled former colleague trying to claim credit for someone else's work. The threat was clear, and it revealed the full scope of their conspiracy. They hadn't just stolen my research. They had prepared a complete narrative to destroy my credibility if I tried to fight back. Amanda would claim that I had somehow gained access to her work and was now trying to pass it off as my own. With her new position at Green Tech and her industry connections, her version of events would carry more weight than mine. But David had made a critical error in his threat. He had revealed that they were afraid of what I might do, that they recognized I had the power to cause problems for their carefully constructed deception. If they were truly confident in their ability to get away with stealing my research, they wouldn't need to threaten me into silence. More importantly, David's threat had clarified the situation in a way that his earlier manipulative explanations had not. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. This was a deliberate, calculated attack on my life and career, executed by two people who were willing to destroy me to achieve their own goals. As I looked at my husband making threats in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage that had apparently been a lie from the beginning, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and betrayal were still there, but they were being overshadowed by something much more powerful: determination. David and Amanda had made the mistake of underestimating me. They had assumed that I was just a naive academic who could be manipulated and discarded without consequences. They thought that their connections and resources made them untouchable, that I would accept their version of events and disappear quietly into the background of their successful new life. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The morning after my confrontation with David, I woke up alone in our king-sized bed for the first time in 7 years. He had left sometime during the night, taking a suitcase and leaving behind only a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter that read, "Sarah, I need some time to think. We'll talk soon. D." The coward couldn't even face me after revealing the full extent of his betrayal, choosing instead to flee to whatever temporary sanctuary Amanda had undoubtedly prepared for him. Standing in my kitchen, holding that pathetic excuse for an explanation, I felt the last vestiges of my old life crumbling away. The woman who had trusted blindly, who had shared everything with a man she thought loved her, who had believed that hard work and genuine innovation would naturally lead to success and recognition. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone, harder, more calculating, and infinitely more dangerous to people who underestimated her capabilities. I spent the morning methodically documenting everything I could remember about the previous day's events. Every detail of Amanda's presentation, every slide that had been stolen from my research, every technical explanation that had been lifted directly from my work. I transcribed David's threats as precisely as I could recall them, noting his admission of the affair, his acknowledgement of the theft, and his attempts to intimidate me into silence. If this situation was going to become a legal battle, I wanted to ensure that my recollections were as accurate and detailed as possible. But documentation was only the first step. What I needed was evidence that would hold up in court, proof that could withstand the kind of legal challenges that someone with Amanda's resources and connections might mount. I needed to demonstrate not just that my research had been stolen, but exactly how the theft had occurred, who was responsible, and what damages I had suffered as a result. The home laboratory where I had spent 4 years developing my breakthrough technology suddenly became a crime scene in my mind. Every computer, every file cabinet, every notebook represented potential evidence of intellectual property theft. I began systematically cataloging everything, taking photographs of my equipment setup, my research notes, my prototype panels, anything that could establish the timeline of my innovations and prove that I was the original creator of the technology Amanda was now claiming as her own. My computer files told a story that would be impossible for David and Amanda to refute. Every algorithm had timestamps showing when it was created and modified. Every test result was dated and cross-referenced with my laboratory notebooks. Every breakthrough was documented with detailed explanations of the problem-solving process that had led to the innovation. Most importantly, everything was backed up on multiple systems, including cloud storage services that maintained their own independent records of file creation and modification dates. As I reviewed years of research documentation, I began to see patterns that I had missed while living through the actual theft. David's questions about my work had become increasingly specific over the past 8 months, coinciding almost exactly with when he had first mentioned Amanda. His request to help with administrative tasks had given him access to sensitive files at precisely the moments when I was achieving my most significant breakthroughs. His encouragement to work longer hours and pursue more ambitious goals had isolated me from professional contacts who might have provided guidance or protection. The most damning evidence was in my email communications. David had insisted on helping me organize my digital files, creating shared folders and backup systems that he claimed would protect my work from computer failures or data corruption. In reality, he had been systematically copying everything to accounts that he controlled, building a complete archive of my research that he could transfer to Amanda whenever they decided to execute their plan. I found email threads between David and me discussing technical details that had later appeared verbatim in Amanda's presentation. I found calendar entries showing that David had scheduled work sessions in my laboratory during times when he knew I would be away, giving him opportunity to access my physical research materials and prototype equipment. I found financial records showing that David had been spending money on expensive dinners, gifts, and travel that far exceeded what his salary at Fletcher Marketing could support, suggesting that he was already benefiting financially from his conspiracy with Amanda. But the most devastating discovery was a series of deleted files that I was able to recover from my computer's backup systems. These were documents that David had created, apparently as part of his collaboration with Amanda, that showed detailed timelines for stealing my research, strategies for discrediting me if I tried to fight back, and financial projections for the revenue they expected to generate from my stolen technology. One document, titled Project Transition, S to A, contained a step-by-step plan for transferring my innovations to Amanda's control. It outlined methods for gaining access to my research files, techniques for repackaging my work to obscure, its origins, and strategies for positioning Amanda as the original innovator. The document included detailed analyses of my personality and working habits, identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited to maintain my trust while the theft was being executed. Another document contained character assessments that were brutal in their clinical detachment. David had analyzed my social isolation, my financial dependence on potential licensing deals, my emotional investment in my research, and my lack of experience with corporate politics, identifying each of these factors as advantages in their plan to steal my work without consequences. He had literally weaponized my love for him and my dedication to my research against me. The financial projections were perhaps the most infuriating documents I discovered. David and Amanda had calculated that my solar efficiency technology could generate between $50 and $200 million in licensing revenue over the next decade, depending on market conditions and manufacturing partnerships. They had projected their own compensation, planned their career advancement strategies, and even discussed potential exit strategies that would maximize their personal wealth while minimizing legal exposure. Reading these documents felt like being dissected while still alive. Every personal detail, every professional vulnerability, every emotional weakness had been cataloged and exploited by two people who had systematically destroyed my life for their own financial gain. The betrayal was so complete, so methodically planned, that I felt like I had been living in a completely fabricated reality designed to serve their conspiracy. But anger, no matter how justified, would not solve my problem. What I needed was a strategy that would expose their theft, recover my stolen intellectual property, and ensure that they faced appropriate consequences for their crimes. I needed to think like the scientist I was, identify the problem, gather evidence, form hypotheses, test solutions, and implement the most effective approach. My first call was to Patricia Hendricks, an intellectual property attorney whose name I had found through the Colorado Bar Association's lawyer referral service. Her practice specialized in technology theft cases, and her website indicated extensive experience with federal intellectual property crimes. When I explained my situation during our initial phone consultation, her response was immediate and unequivocal. Dr. Martinez, what you're describing is not just civil intellectual property infringement. This is criminal conspiracy to commit theft of trade secrets, and it involves federal crimes that carry serious penalties. Patricia agreed to meet with me that afternoon to review the evidence I had gathered. Her office was located in downtown Denver's legal district, occupying the 15th floor of a gleaming office tower that projected exactly the kind of professional competence and resources I needed to fight Amanda and David's well-funded conspiracy. Patricia herself was a woman in her early 50s with prematurely gray hair and the focused intensity of someone who had spent decades fighting complicated legal battles. She listened to my story without interruption, taking detailed notes and asking occasional clarifying questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of intellectual property law and technology theft cases. Dr. Martinez, based on what you've told me and the evidence you've shown me, I believe we have grounds for both civil and criminal actions, she said, after reviewing my documentation for over an hour. The civil case would focus on recovering damages for the theft of your intellectual property, while the criminal case would be pursued by federal prosecutors for violations of the Economic Espionage Act and other federal statutes governing trade secret theft. What kind of damages Are we talking about, I asked, potentially substantial? If your technology is as valuable as you've indicated, and if we can prove that the defendants have already begun commercializing your stolen innovations, we could be looking at damages in the tens of millions of dollars. That includes not just the value of the stolen technology, but also punitive damages designed to deter this kind of behavior, and compensation for the destruction of your career and professional reputation. Patricia explained that intellectual property theft cases involving stolen trade secrets were treated very seriously by federal law enforcement, particularly when they involved systematic conspiracies and significant financial damages. The FBI's Intellectual Property Division had specialized agents who investigated these crimes, and federal prosecutors had broad authority to pursue criminal charges that could result in substantial prison sentences for the perpetrators. The key to success in these cases is documentation and evidence, Patricia continued. From what you've shown me, your documentation is excellent. The timestamps on your files, the backup systems that prove when your innovations were created, and the recovered documents showing the defendants' planning and conspiracy, all of this provides a solid foundation for both civil and criminal cases. What about David's threats that Amanda has connections who could destroy what's left of my career? Those threats are actually additional evidence of criminal behavior. Witness intimidation and obstruction of justice are separate federal crimes that carry their own penalties. If the defendants continue making threats or attempting to interfere with your legal rights, that will only strengthen our case and increase the potential penalties they face. Patricia recommended that we immediately file a temporary restraining order to prevent Amanda and GreenTech from using or commercializing my stolen technology while the legal proceedings were ongoing. She also suggested that we contact the FBI's Intellectual Property Division to report the federal crimes and request a criminal investigation. Dr. Martinez, I want you to understand that this is going to be a difficult process. The defendants clearly have resources and connections, and they've already demonstrated their willingness to engage in criminal behavior to protect their interests. They're going to fight back aggressively, and they're going to try to discredit you and your claims. I understand, but I can't let them get away with this. They've stolen 4 years of my life and destroyed my career. If I don't fight back, they'll do the same thing to other researchers and inventors. That's exactly the right attitude. These cases require determination and resilience, but they also serve an important public interest in protecting innovation and intellectual property rights. Patricia and I spent the remainder of the afternoon developing a comprehensive legal strategy. We would simultaneously pursue civil litigation against David, Amanda, and GreenTech for theft of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional interference with business relationships. We would also file criminal complaints with the FBI and request a federal investigation into violations of the Economic Espionage Act and related federal statutes. The temporary restraining order would be filed first, seeking immediate injunctive relief to prevent further commercialization of my stolen technology. This would put Amanda and GreenTech on notice that I was prepared to fight, and it would create legal obstacles to their plan to profit from my innovations while the cases were being resolved. Dr. Martinez, I need to prepare you for the possibility that this process could take years to resolve completely. Intellectual property litigation is complex and time-consuming, and the defendants will likely employ every possible delay tactic and legal challenge. Are you prepared for that kind of extended battle? I've spent 4 years developing technology that could revolutionize renewable energy. I'm certainly prepared to spend whatever time is necessary to ensure that the people who stole my work face appropriate consequences. As I left Patricia's office that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced since walking out of that devastating presentation at GreenTech. Hope. Not the naive optimism that had characterized my relationship with David, but the determined confidence that comes from having a plan, having evidence, and having professional allies who understand how to fight effectively against well-funded opponents. The drive home took me past the GreenTech Solutions building where Amanda was undoubtedly working late, probably preparing presentations and proposals based on my stolen research. The lights were on in several upper-floor offices, and I imagined her sitting in some expensive executive suite, enjoying the success and recognition that should have been mine. But Amanda's apparent victory was built on a foundation of lies and criminal behavior that was about to collapse. She might have connections and resources, but she had made the critical error of underestimating her victim. She had assumed that I was just another naive researcher who could be manipulated and discarded without consequences. She was about to discover that stealing from someone with advanced degrees in engineering and physics meant stealing from someone who understood how to analyze problems systematically and develop effective solutions. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. The caller ID showed David's number, and for a moment I considered ignoring the call. But I realized that anything he said might provide additional evidence for the legal cases I was preparing to file. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said without preamble when I answered. "I think we've said everything that needs to be said, David." "No, we haven't. You're making a mistake that's going to hurt everyone involved, including yourself. Amanda is willing to work out a reasonable arrangement that recognizes your contributions to the technology development." "My contributions? David, it's my technology. I developed every algorithm, conducted every test, solved every problem. Amanda contributed nothing except the theft." "Sarah, please be reasonable. Amanda has already invested significant time and resources into bringing your technology to market. She's made commitments to green tech and their investors. If you try to disrupt that now, you're going to create legal and financial problems for a lot of people." "Good. Maybe those people should have thought about legal and financial problems before they decided to steal my intellectual property." "Sarah, Amanda has spoken with her lawyers. If you file lawsuits or make accusations about theft, she's prepared to countersue for defamation, harassment, and interference with business relationships. She has documentation showing that she developed this technology independently, and she has witnesses who will testify that you had access to her work through our professional relationship." David was continuing the intimidation strategy he had begun the previous evening, but now his threats were more specific and more detailed. Amanda had clearly prepared a comprehensive defense against any legal challenges I might mount, including fabricated evidence and false witnesses who would support her version of events. "David, let me make something very clear to you. I have 4 years of documentation proving that I developed this technology. I have timestamps, backups, laboratory notebooks, and photographic evidence that establishes a complete timeline of my innovations. Most importantly, I have the deleted files from our home computer that show your planning documents for stealing my research and transferring it to Amanda." The silence on the other end of the line told me that David hadn't expected me to discover their planning documents. He had probably assumed that deleting the files would eliminate any evidence of their conspiracy, not realizing that I had backup systems that preserved everything. "Sarah, those documents were we were exploring different possibilities for commercializing your technology. We never intended to exclude you from the process. David, one of your documents is titled Project Transition, S to A. Another contains detailed character assessments analyzing my vulnerabilities and how they could be exploited. Those aren't commercialization strategies. They're criminal conspiracy plans. Sarah, please. Let's meet in person and discuss this rationally. Amanda and I want to find a solution that works for everyone. We don't want this to become a legal battle that destroys all of our lives." "It's too late for that, David. You made your choice when you decided to steal my research. Amanda made her choice when she decided to present my work as her own. Now you both get to live with the consequences of those choices." "Sarah, I'm trying to protect you here. Amanda has resources and connections that you can't compete with. If you try to fight her, she will destroy you. She will make sure that you never work in renewable energy or any other technology sector again. She will ruin your reputation so completely that no one will ever trust or respect your work." "Is that a threat, David?" It's a warning. Amanda doesn't want to hurt you, but she will if you force her to. She's worked too hard to build her career to let anyone destroy it, even you. Amanda built her career on my stolen research. She doesn't have a career to protect. She has a criminal enterprise that's about to be exposed. I ended the call without giving David a chance to continue his threats, but his words had actually provided valuable information about Amanda's state of mind and her strategic approach to defending against my legal challenges. She was confident in her ability to discredit me, which suggested that she had prepared fabricated evidence and false testimony to support her claims of independent development. More importantly, David's threats demonstrated that they were afraid of what I might do, which meant they recognized that I had the power to cause serious problems for their conspiracy. If they were truly confident in their ability to get away with stealing my research, they wouldn't need to make increasingly desperate attempts to intimidate me into silence. The next morning, I received an email from Amanda that was clearly designed to create a written record supporting her version of events. The message was professionally worded and carefully crafted to make her appear reasonable while subtly threatening me with legal consequences if I continued challenging her claims. Dear Sarah, I understand that there may have been some confusion about the technology I presented at Green Tech Solutions. I want to assure you that this technology represents years of my own independent research and development, conducted entirely separate from any conversations we may have had about renewable energy innovations. I recognize that our professional relationship through David may have created the impression that we were collaborating on research projects, but I want to clarify that my work was developed independently, using my own resources and expertise. I hope we can resolve any misunderstandings amicably and continue to support each other's professional endeavors. Please let me know if you would like to discuss this further. Best regards, Amanda Chen, Chief Technology Officer, Green Tech Solutions. The email was obviously written by lawyers and designed to establish Amanda's position that she had developed the technology independently, while acknowledging just enough of our previous interactions to explain any similarities between her work and mine. She was trying to create documentation that would support her defense against theft accusations while appearing to be reasonable and professional. But Amanda's carefully crafted email actually provided additional evidence of her knowledge that she had stolen my research. Her acknowledgement of our professional relationship and her reference to conversations about renewable energy innovations established that she had access to my work. Her attempt to characterize 4 years of systematic theft as potential confusion and misunderstandings demonstrated consciousness of guilt and an attempt to minimize criminal behavior. I forwarded Amanda's email to Patricia with a note explaining the context and asking for her legal analysis. Her response was immediate and encouraging. This email is actually helpful to our case. She's acknowledging access to your work while attempting to establish a defense against theft accusations. The fact that she felt compelled to send this message suggests that she's concerned about potential legal challenges and is trying to create documentation supporting her position. We can use this as evidence of her knowledge that she engaged in improper behavior. That afternoon, Patricia and I filed the temporary restraining order in federal court, seeking immediate injunctive relief to prevent Amanda and Green Tech from using or commercializing my stolen technology. The filing included comprehensive documentation of my innovations, evidence of the systematic theft, and proof of the conspiracy between David and Amanda to steal my intellectual property. We also filed a formal complaint with the FBI's Intellectual and Property Division, providing detailed evidence of federal crimes, including theft of trade secrets, conspiracy, and witness intimidation. The FBI agent who accepted our complaint, Special Agent Maria Rodriguez, had extensive experience investigating technology theft cases and immediately recognized the seriousness of the accusations we were making. Dr. Martinez, based on the evidence you've provided, this appears to be a significant case involving systematic theft of valuable intellectual property, Agent Rodriguez said during our initial meeting. The documentation you've maintained and The deleted files you've recovered provide strong evidence of criminal conspiracy. We'll begin a formal investigation immediately." As I left the FBI field office that evening, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge or personal vindication. I had spent 4 years developing technology that could help address climate change and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. That technology belonged in the hands of people who would use it responsibly and ethically, not criminals who had stolen it for their own personal gain. David and Amanda had made the mistake of assuming that I would accept their theft quietly, that I lacked the resources or determination to fight back effectively. They were about to discover that they had targeted the wrong victim, and that their carefully planned conspiracy was about to face the full force of both civil and criminal legal consequences. The federal restraining order was served to Amanda and Green Tech Solutions on a Thursday morning at precisely 9:15 a.m. I know the exact time because Special Agent Rodriguez called me immediately afterward to inform me that both defendants had been officially notified of the legal proceedings and the injunction preventing them from using my stolen technology. The timing was perfect, occurring during Green Tech's weekly executive meeting, which meant that Amanda received the legal documents in front of her colleagues, investors, and board members. According to Agent Rodriguez, Amanda's reaction was immediate and explosive. She had apparently been in the middle of presenting quarterly projections based on the commercialization timeline for my stolen solar technology when federal marshals interrupted the meeting to serve the restraining order. The presentation had to be halted while Amanda consulted with her lawyers, and several major investors reportedly left the building within an hour of the legal documents being served. Green Tech's stock price dropped 12% that day as news of the intellectual property dispute became public. Financial news outlets picked up the story, reporting that the company's flagship renewable energy technology was subject to federal litigation and criminal investigation. Industry analysts began questioning the validity of Green Tech's recent claims about breakthrough innovations, and several potential manufacturing partners suspended negotiations pending resolution of the legal issues. But Amanda's professional humiliation was only the beginning of her problems. The FBI's investigation had uncovered evidence that she had committed similar intellectual property thefts at her previous employers, establishing a pattern of criminal behavior that elevated the federal charges from simple trade secret theft to racketeering and organized criminal activity. Agent Rodriguez informed me that Amanda was now facing potential prison sentences totaling 15 to 20 years if convicted on all charges. David's situation was equally desperate. The financial records subpoenaed during the FBI investigation revealed that he had received over $200,000 in payments from Amanda over the past 8 months, money that he had used to finance their relationship while maintaining the facade of a normal marriage with me. The payments were structured to avoid tax reporting requirements, which added federal tax evasion charges to his already substantial legal problems. More damaging to David's position was the discovery that he had used his access to my research, not just to benefit Amanda, but to steal proprietary information from his other clients at Fletcher Marketing Solutions. The FBI found evidence that David had systematically copied confidential technical documents from multiple technology companies, apparently planning to sell the information to competitors or use it to establish his own consulting business. His criminal exposure now extended far beyond our personal situation to encompass a multi-year pattern of corporate espionage and trade secret theft. Fletcher Marketing Solutions fired David immediately upon learning of the federal investigation, and the company's lawyers informed him that they would be pursuing their own civil lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, theft of client confidential information, and damages to the company's reputation and business relationships. His professional reputation was destroyed so completely that he would never work in marketing, technology, or any related field again. The personal confrontation I had been expecting finally occurred 3 weeks after the restraining order was served. David appeared at our house one evening, looking haggard and desperate in a way that would have generated sympathy from me just months earlier. Now, seeing him standing on the porch of the home we had shared, I felt only cold satisfaction at his obvious distress. "Sarah, please. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can still work this out." I opened the door but didn't invite him inside. "David, you're not supposed to contact me directly while the legal proceedings are ongoing. Your lawyers should have explained that to you." "Forget the lawyers for a minute. This is about us, about our marriage, about 7 years of our lives together. Are you really going to throw all of that away over a business dispute?" "A business dispute? David, you systematically stole my life's work and gave it to your girlfriend so she could destroy my career and get rich from my innovations. That's not a business dispute. That's criminal conspiracy and personal betrayal on a scale that defies comprehension." David stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. He had clearly been drinking heavily, probably trying to work up the courage for this confrontation or numb himself to the reality of his situation. "Sarah, I made mistakes. I admit that. But Amanda and I never intended for things to go this far. We thought we could bring your technology to market faster and more effectively than you could on your own. We thought everyone would benefit, including you." "David, I've read your planning documents. I know exactly what you intended. You calculated how much money you could make from my stolen research. You analyzed my personality to identify vulnerabilities you could exploit. You planned strategies for discrediting me if I tried to fight back. None of that sounds like helping me commercialize my technology." "Those documents were just contingency planning, Sarah. We had to consider different scenarios in case things went wrong. But the primary goal was always to make sure your innovations reached their full potential." David was still lying, still trying to manipulate me even as his entire conspiracy was collapsing around him. He couldn't admit the truth about his motivations even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of his criminal behavior. "David, let me explain something to you. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with executives from Tesla, Google, and 3 major renewable energy companies. They're all interested in licensing my solar efficiency technology now that it's been validated by the federal court proceedings. The publicity from your theft has actually increased interest in my innovations, and I'm looking at licensing deals worth significantly more than what you and Amanda thought you could steal." David's face went white. "Sarah, you can't do that. If you license the technology to other companies, it will interfere with Amanda's commitments to green tech. You'll create additional legal problems for everyone involved." Amanda's commitments to green tech are based on stolen technology that she has no legal right to use. Any problems that creates are entirely her responsibility, not mine. "Sarah, please. Amanda's lawyer says that if you continue with these lawsuits and licensing deals, she'll have no choice but to pursue her countersuit for defamation and interference with business relationships. She has documentation that could seriously damage your reputation and your ability to work in this industry." "What documentation?" "David, Amanda has nothing except fabricated evidence and false testimony. She can't produce any legitimate proof that she developed my technology because she didn't develop it. I did. She has witnesses who will testify that she was working on similar innovations before she ever met you. She has patent applications that predate some of your work. She has financial records showing that she invested her own money in research and development activities." I laughed, and the sound was cold and bitter even to my own ears. "David, Amanda can produce all the fabricated evidence she wants. I have 4 years of continuously documented research, backed up on multiple systems, with timestamps that can't be faked. I have laboratory notebooks with detailed handwritten entries, showing my problem-solving process. I have photographs of my prototype development that establish a clear timeline of innovation. Most importantly, I have your own planning documents that prove the conspiracy to steal my work." David's desperate facade finally cracked completely. "Sarah, you're destroying everything. Amanda's career, my career, our marriage, our future together. Is your pride really worth all of that destruction?" "My pride? David, this isn't about pride. This is about justice. This is about ensuring that criminals face consequences for their actions. This is about protecting other researchers and inventors from the kind of systematic theft that you and Amanda perpetrated against me. Sarah, I'm begging you, please. Amanda and I will do whatever it takes to make this right. We'll make sure you're compensated for your work. We'll make sure you get recognition for your innovations. We'll find a way to share the success rather than fighting over it. David, it's too late for that. You had 7 years to treat me with honesty and respect. Amanda had multiple opportunities to pursue legitimate collaborations with me. Instead, you both chose criminal behavior. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. David stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him, finally beginning to understand that his situation was hopeless. The charm and manipulation that had worked on me for years were useless now that I fully understood the extent of his betrayal. Sarah, what do you want from me? What would it take for you to drop these lawsuits and let us move on with our lives? I want you to face appropriate consequences for stealing my research and destroying my career. I want Amanda to lose everything she gained through criminal behavior. I want other potential victims to see that intellectual property theft carries serious penalties, and I want to rebuild my life and my career without having to worry about the two people who betrayed me most deeply. And our marriage? Is there any possibility of working through this? I looked at David standing on our porch, desperate and disheveled and still trying to manipulate me into protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. 7 years earlier, I had fallen in love with what I thought was his genuine interest in my work and his supportive partnership in building our shared future. Now I realized that everything I had loved about him had been a performance designed to gain access to my research and exploit my professional achievements. David, our marriage ended the moment you decided to steal my life's work and give it to another woman. Everything we had together was built on lies and manipulation. There's nothing left to save. David nodded slowly, finally understanding that his attempts at reconciliation were futile. Sarah, I want you to know that I did love you. Maybe not in the right way or not consistently, but there were real feelings involved. David, if you had loved me, you wouldn't have spent months planning to destroy my career. If you had loved me, you wouldn't have shared intimate details about my work and my vulnerabilities with another woman. If you had loved me, you would have celebrated my achievements instead of stealing them. As David walked away from our house for the last time, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure and liberation. The man who had defined my adult life, who had shaped my understanding of partnership and trust, who had been my closest confidant and most trusted advisor, was finally revealed as the criminal he had always been underneath his supportive facade. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. David's criminal exposure left him with no negotiating power, and his lawyers advised him to accept whatever settlement terms I proposed rather than risk additional scrutiny of his financial activities. I kept the house, the cars, and all of our shared assets, while David was left with nothing except mounting legal bills and the prospect of federal prison time. Amanda's situation deteriorated even more rapidly than David's. The federal investigation revealed that her claims of independent research were entirely fabricated, supported by backdated documents and false testimony from paid witnesses. The FBI found evidence that she had been running intellectual property theft operations for over 5 years, targeting innovative researchers and stealing their work to advance her own career. Green Tech Solutions fired Amanda and settled my civil lawsuit for $12 million, rather than risk the potential damages that could result from a trial. The company's reputation was severely damaged by the association with systematic intellectual property theft, and several board members resigned in the aftermath of the scandal. Amanda herself was convicted on federal charges, including theft of trade secrets, conspiracy, racketeering, and perjury. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $20 million to her various victims. Her professional reputation was destroyed so completely that she would never work in technology or any legitimate business again. The licensing deals I negotiated for my solar efficiency technology exceeded my most optimistic projections. Tesla agreed to a partnership that would integrate my innovations into their solar roof products, while Google licensed the technology for their renewable energy data center initiatives. The three major renewable energy companies I worked with committed to manufacturing partnerships that would bring my technology to residential and commercial markets worldwide. Within 18 months of Amanda's theft, I had become one of the most successful independent researchers in renewable energy technology. My innovations were being implemented in solar installations across the globe, contributing to significant improvements in clean energy efficiency and cost-effectiveness. The technology that David and Amanda had tried to steal was now generating the financial success and professional recognition that I had worked so hard to achieve. But the most satisfying aspect of my victory wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the knowledge that I had fought back against criminal behavior and won. I had refused to be victimized by people who thought they could exploit and discard me without consequences. I had proven that intelligence, determination, and systematic preparation could overcome even well-funded criminal conspiracies. The Renewable Energy Research Foundation I established with a portion of my licensing revenue now provides grants and legal support to independent inventors and researchers who face intellectual property theft. We've helped dozens of victims recover their stolen work and prosecute the criminals who targeted them. The foundation has become a model for protecting innovation and ensuring that breakthrough technologies are developed and commercialized by their legitimate creators. 2 years after that devastating presentation at Green Tech Solutions, I stood in my new laboratory facility in Boulder, Colorado, watching technicians install the latest generation of my solar efficiency technology. The laboratory was 10 times larger than my home setup, equipped with state-of-the-art research equipment and staffed by brilliant engineers who shared my commitment to advancing renewable energy innovation. David was serving a 4-year federal prison sentence for trade secret theft, tax evasion, and conspiracy charges. His appeals had been denied, and his projected release date was still more than 2 years away. Amanda remained in federal custody, with her earliest possible parole date still 5 years in the future. Both of them had been ordered to stay away from me permanently, and violations of those orders would result in additional federal charges. I had recently remarried to Dr. Michael Chen, an environmental engineer who shared my passion for renewable energy research and understood the importance of intellectual property protection. Our relationship was built on genuine mutual respect, shared professional interests, and the kind of honest communication that I had never experienced with David. Michael celebrated my achievements without trying to exploit them, supported my work without demanding access to proprietary information, and treated me as an equal partner in every aspect of our life together. Standing in my laboratory that day, surrounded by the evidence of my professional success and personal happiness, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from victim of systematic betrayal to leader in renewable energy innovation. The theft of my research had been devastating, but it had also revealed strengths and capabilities that I never knew I possessed. I had learned that intelligence and preparation could overcome almost any obstacle, that systematic documentation and legal strategy could defeat even well-funded criminal conspiracies, and that refusing to be victimized was sometimes the most important decision a person could make. Most importantly, I had learned that my own determination and professional capabilities were more valuable than any relationship built on lies and exploitation. The solar panels visible through my laboratory windows were generating clean energy from the Colorado sunshine, powered by technology that I had developed through years of dedicated research and protected through months of determined legal fighting. The innovation that David and Amanda had tried to steal was now contributing to a more sustainable future for millions of people worldwide. As I prepared to begin my next research project, focused on energy storage systems that could revolutionize renewable energy applications, I smiled at the irony of my situation. The two people who had tried to destroy my career had actually helped me achieve success beyond my wildest dreams. Their theft had generated publicity that attracted major corporate partners. Their criminal behavior had validated the value of my innovations, and their ultimate prosecution had established me as a leader in intellectual property protection. David and Amanda had thought they were stealing my future. Instead, they had simply revealed how bright that future could be when built on truth, hard work, and the determination to fight for what's right. 5 years had passed since that catastrophic morning when I discovered my husband's ultimate betrayal, and the woman I had become bore little resemblance to the naive researcher who had once trusted blindly in the goodness of others. Standing in the gleaming boardroom of SolarTech Innovations, the company I had built from the ashes of my stolen dreams, I gazed out at the Denver skyline and marveled at how completely my life had transformed. The company occupied 3 floors of the prestigious Millennium Tower, with research laboratories that rivaled those of major universities, manufacturing partnerships that spanned 4 continents, and a staff of brilliant engineers and scientists who had joined my mission to revolutionize renewable energy technology. My breakthrough in solar panel efficiency had been just the beginning of a cascade of innovations that were reshaping the entire industry. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, my chief technology officer and closest professional collaborator, knocked on my office door before entering with the latest quarterly reports. Jennifer had been one of the executives present during that devastating presentation at Green Tech Solutions 5 years earlier, and she had contacted me within weeks of Amanda's arrest to express her admiration for how I had fought back against the theft of my work. Her decision to leave Green Tech and join my startup had been one of many vindications that followed in the aftermath of the criminal prosecutions. "Sarah, the numbers are even better than we projected," Jennifer said, settling into the chair across from my desk. The Tesla partnership generated $47 million in licensing revenue this quarter, and the Google contract is tracking toward even higher returns. The residential installation program has exceeded capacity in 12 states, and we're getting requests for international expansion from companies in Japan, Germany, and Australia. I smiled as I reviewed the financial reports, remembering the projections that David and Amanda had made in their stolen planning documents. They had calculated potential revenues of $50 to $200 million over a decade, but my legitimate commercialization of the technology had already generated over $300 million in the first 3 years alone. Their theft had actually delayed the full realization of the technology's value, costing them far more than they could ever have imagined. The manufacturing efficiency improvements we implemented last month are showing remarkable results, Jennifer continued. We've reduced production costs by another 18% while increasing output quality, which means our profit margins are the highest in the industry. The engineering team thinks we can achieve another 12% improvement by the end of the year. The irony wasn't lost on me that the research foundation I had established to help victims of intellectual property theft had become one of the most successful initiatives in the technology sector. We had helped over 200 researchers and inventors recover their stolen work, prosecute the criminals who had targeted them, and establish legitimate commercialization partnerships. The Foundation's legal advocacy program had become so effective that intellectual property theft cases now routinely resulted in successful prosecutions and substantial damages awards. "There's something else I wanted to discuss with you," Jennifer said, her expression becoming more serious. "We received a request yesterday from a documentary filmmaker who wants to tell the story of how you fought back against Amanda and David's conspiracy. The production company has backing from Netflix, and they think your story could inspire other victims of corporate theft to pursue justice rather than accepting defeat." The prospect of revisiting those painful memories in such a public forum was daunting, but I recognized the potential value of sharing my experience with a broader audience. Intellectual property theft was becoming increasingly common as technology companies competed for breakthrough innovations, and many victims lacked the resources or knowledge necessary to fight back effectively against well-funded criminals. "What kind of access are they requesting?" I asked. They want to interview you extensively about the theft, the investigation, and the legal proceedings. They also want to interview Agent Rodriguez from the FBI, Patricia Hendricks, your attorney, and several of the corporate executives who licensed your technology after the criminal prosecutions. They've indicated that they would respect your privacy regarding personal details about your marriage and focus primarily on the professional and legal aspects of the case. I considered the proposal carefully. The documentary could provide valuable education about intellectual property protection and encourage other victims to pursue justice rather than accepting criminal behavior. It could also serve as a deterrent to potential thieves who might assume that independent researchers and inventors were easy targets for exploitation. Set up a meeting with the production team, I decided. I'm willing to participate if they approach the story responsibly and focus on the broader implications rather than sensationalizing the personal drama. Jennifer nodded and made notes in her tablet. There's one more thing. The parole board contacted the victim services coordinator yesterday. Amanda Chen is eligible for early release consideration next month, and they wanted to inform you about the hearing process. The news that Amanda might be released early from her 8-year sentence was disturbing, but not entirely unexpected. Federal prisoners could petition for early release after serving 60% of their sentences if they demonstrated rehabilitation and posed minimal risk of reoffending. Amanda had been incarcerated for nearly 5 years, which made her eligible for parole consideration. What's the process for victim impact statements? I asked. You can submit written statements or testify in person at the parole hearing. The board is required to consider victim impact when making release decisions, and your testimony would carry significant weight given the scope of the crimes and the ongoing effects on your life and career. I had mixed feelings about Amanda's potential release. Part of me wanted her to serve her full sentence as consequences for the systematic theft and the years of damage to other victims beyond myself. But another part of me had moved so far beyond. The original trauma that her continued incarceration felt less important than ensuring she couldn't repeat her criminal behavior against other victims. I'll submit a written statement supporting continued incarceration, I decided. Amanda's crimes weren't impulsive mistakes. They were part of a calculated pattern of theft that affected multiple victims over several years. Early release would minimize the seriousness of intellectual property crimes and potentially encourage other criminals to view these offenses as carrying minimal consequences. The remainder of my workday was filled with meetings about new research initiatives, partnership negotiations with international companies, and strategic planning for expanding our manufacturing capabilities. The contrast with my previous life, as an isolated researcher working from a converted garage, was so dramatic that it sometimes felt like I was living someone else's existence. My personal life had been equally transformed. My marriage to Dr. Michael Chen had brought me the kind of partnership I had never experienced with David. Michael was a respected environmental engineer who had built his own successful consulting firm specializing in sustainable development projects. He understood the demands of research and innovation, respected my professional independence, and celebrated my achievements without seeking to exploit or control them. Our relationship had developed slowly and carefully, built on mutual respect and shared values, rather than the passionate intensity that had characterized my relationship with David. Michael had been completely transparent about his background, his financial situation, his previous relationships, and his professional activities. He had encouraged me to investigate his claims, verify his credentials, and satisfy myself about his motivations before we became seriously involved. The trust issues that resulted from David's betrayal had taken years to overcome, and Michael had been patient and understanding throughout my gradual process of learning to trust again. He had never pressured me for access to proprietary information, never questioned my security measures for protecting intellectual property, and never suggested that my caution was excessive or unreasonable. Our home in the foothills west of Denver was a testament to both of our professional successes and our shared commitment to environmental sustainability. The house was powered entirely by my solar technology, heated and cooled by geothermal systems that Michael had designed, and surrounded by native landscaping that required minimal water or maintenance. It was a sanctuary where we could both pursue our individual interests while building a life together based on honesty and mutual support. That evening, as Michael and I prepared dinner together in our solar-powered kitchen, he mentioned that he had received an interesting phone call at his office. "Someone claiming to be David Martinez called my office today," he said, carefully measuring ingredients for the organic pasta sauce we were preparing. "He said he was your former husband and wanted to discuss something important with you." My blood went cold. David had been released from federal prison 6 months earlier after serving 4 years of his sentence, but the restraining orders that protected me from contact remained in effect. Any attempt to communicate with me directly or indirectly constituted a federal crime that could result in his immediate reincarceration. "What exactly did he say?" I asked. He claimed that he had important information about Amanda Chen's early release petition and that he wanted to warn you about potential safety concerns. He said Amanda had made threats while they were both incarcerated, and that you needed to know about them for your own protection. The story sounded like a manipulation designed to circumvent the restraining orders by claiming to provide information for my safety. David had always been skilled at crafting explanations that made his inappropriate behavior seem reasonable or even helpful, and his years in prison were unlikely to have changed his fundamental character. "Did you tell him anything about me? Or our life together?" "I told him that I would pass along his message, but that any further communication should go through your attorney. I didn't provide any personal information, and I ended the call as quickly as possible." Michael's handling of the situation was exactly what I would have hoped for: protective without being controlling, cautious without being paranoid, and respectful of my right to make decisions about my own safety and security. I called Patricia Hendricks immediately to report the contact and discuss appropriate responses. Patricia had remained my attorney throughout the years following the criminal prosecutions, handling various legal matters related to my business expansion, patent portfolio management, and ongoing protection from David and Amanda. Their theft of my solar technology had generated not just my personal success, but a movement that was protecting innovation and supporting victims throughout the technology sector. The woman I had become bore little resemblance to the naive researcher who had once trusted blindly in others' good intentions. I had developed strength, wisdom, and capabilities that I never knew I possessed, and I had used those qualities to build not just personal success, but systemic change that would benefit countless others. David and Amanda had thought they were stealing my future, but they had actually revealed how bright that future could be when built on truth, determination, and the refusal to accept victimization. Their betrayal had been devastating, but my response to that betrayal had created something far more valuable than anything they could have stolen. Standing in my office that evening, looking out at the city lights powered in part by my solar innovations, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The criminals who had tried to destroy me had instead provided the catalyst for achievements and impact that exceeded my wildest dreams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to protect innovation and support justice. But tonight, I was simply grateful to be exactly where I belonged: successful, secure, and surrounded by people who valued truth and integrity above personal gain. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. "Sarah, this is a clear violation of the restraining order," Patricia said after I explained the situation. "David is prohibited from contacting you directly or indirectly, and using a third party to circumvent that prohibition is explicitly covered by the court order. We should report this to the FBI and request immediate enforcement action." But what if he actually has legitimate information about safety threats from Amanda? If David had legitimate information about threats to your safety, the appropriate channel would be to contact law enforcement directly, not to violate federal court orders by trying to communicate with you personally. This sounds like a manipulation designed to reestablish contact and potentially intimidate you regarding Amanda's parole hearing. Patricia was right, of course. David's supposed concern for my safety was almost certainly a pretext for attempting to influence my testimony at Amanda's parole hearing or to gather information about my current life and business activities. The fact that he had chosen to contact Michael rather than me directly suggested that he was trying to appear reasonable while still violating the legal restrictions that protected me. We filed a formal complaint with the FBI regarding David's violation of the restraining order, and Agent Rodriguez assured me that the violation would be investigated promptly. David's parole officer was notified immediately, and David was required to report for an emergency meeting to explain his actions. The incident reminded me that the criminals who had targeted me years earlier remained potential threats, despite their criminal convictions and incarceration. David's willingness to violate federal court orders suggested that he hadn't genuinely reformed during his prison sentence, and Amanda's potential early release created additional security concerns that I would need to address proactively. I hired a private security firm to conduct a comprehensive assessment of potential threats and recommend appropriate protection measures. The assessment revealed several concerning factors. David had been living in a halfway house just 20 miles from my home and office. Amanda had been corresponding with several former associates who remained active in technology circles. And both criminals had maintained contact with each other throughout their incarcerations. The security firm recommended enhanced physical security at my home and office, including upgraded alarm systems, security cameras, and periodic security patrols. They also recommended that I vary my daily routines, use different routes for traveling between locations, and maintain awareness of potential surveillance or stalking behavior. The measures felt excessive given that years had passed since the original crimes, but the security experts explained that intellectual property criminals often harbored intense resentment toward their victims, particularly when the victims had achieved success that the criminals felt they deserved. The combination of financial losses, public humiliation, and prison sentences could create powerful motivations for revenge or additional criminal behavior. Amanda's parole hearing was scheduled for the following month, and I spent considerable time preparing my victim impact statement. The statement needed to balance several considerations, accurately describing the ongoing effects of her crimes, explaining why early release was inappropriate, and avoiding inflammatory language that might be dismissed as vindictive rather than factual. The final statement was 15 pages long and documented not just the personal and professional damage that Amanda had caused me, but also the broader implications of her systematic theft for other victims and for innovation protection. Generally, I described the years of therapy required to overcome the trust issues created by the betrayal, the ongoing security concerns that affected my daily life, and the business costs associated with protecting my intellectual property from future theft. Most importantly, I explained that Amanda's crimes were not isolated incidents, but part of a calculated pattern of behavior that had affected multiple victims over several years. Early release would send a message that intellectual property theft was not taken seriously by the criminal justice system, potentially encouraging other criminals to view these offenses as carrying minimal consequences. The parole hearing itself was conducted via video conference, allowing me to testify without traveling to the federal facility where Amanda was incarcerated. Seeing her on the screen for the first time in 5 years was jarring. She had aged considerably during her imprisonment, and her once confident demeanor had been replaced by what appeared to be genuine remorse and humility. Amanda's testimony to the parole board was carefully rehearsed and professionally delivered. She acknowledged the severity of her crimes, expressed regret for the damage she had caused, and described the rehabilitation programs she had completed during her incarceration. She claimed to have developed genuine understanding of the harm caused by intellectual property theft and expressed commitment to using her experience to educate others about the consequences of these crimes. The parole board asked detailed questions about Amanda's plans if released early, her financial situation, her employment prospects, and her understanding of the conditions that would govern her supervised release. Her responses were thoughtful and well-prepared, suggesting that she had spent considerable time preparing for the hearing and understood what the board wanted to hear. My testimony focused on the ongoing effects of Amanda's crimes and the inappropriateness of early release given the calculated nature of her criminal behavior. I explained that while I had achieved professional success despite her theft, the trauma and security concerns created by her actions continued to affect my daily life. I emphasized that intellectual property theft was becoming increasingly common, and that strong enforcement of criminal penalties was essential for protecting innovation and encouraging legitimate research and development. The parole board's decision was announced 2 weeks later. Amanda's request for early release was denied, and she would be required to serve at least 80% of her original sentence before becoming eligible for supervised release. The how? Board cited the systematic nature of her crimes, the multiple victims affected by her actions, and the ongoing security concerns raised in victim impact statements. The denial of Amanda's early release provided some relief, but it also highlighted the reality that both criminals who had targeted me would eventually be released and would remain potential threats for years to come. The security measures I had implemented would need to continue indefinitely, and I would need to remain vigilant about protecting both my personal safety and my intellectual property from future attacks. 6 months later, the Netflix documentary about my case premiered to widespread critical acclaim and public interest. Stolen Innovation, the Sarah Martinez story, became one of the most watched documentaries on the platform, generating millions of views and sparking national conversations about intellectual property protection and corporate crime enforcement. The documentary's impact exceeded my expectations in every way. Law schools began using it as a teaching tool for intellectual property courses, business schools incorporated it into ethics curricula, and law enforcement agencies used it to train investigators specializing in technology crimes. Most importantly, it inspired dozens of other theft victims to come forward and pursue justice against the criminals who had targeted them. The documentary also attracted attention from international audiences, leading to speaking invitations from universities, professional organizations, and government agencies around the world. I found myself becoming an inadvertent expert on intellectual property protection and victim advocacy, roles that I embraced as natural extensions of my scientific and entrepreneurial work. The foundation I had established to help theft victims expanded dramatically in response to the increased awareness generated by the documentary. We hired additional attorneys, investigators, and victim advocates, opened regional offices in 4 major cities, and developed online resources that provided guidance and support to victims regardless of their geographic location. By the documentary's first anniversary, our foundation had helped over 500 victims recover their stolen intellectual property, secure criminal prosecutions against more than 200 perpetrators, and obtain damages awards totaling over $800 million. The success stories were remarkable. Independent inventors who recovered breakthrough medical devices, small software companies that prosecuted major corporations for theft, university researchers who exposed systematic plagiarism by colleagues. The Foundation's work had become so successful that it attracted attention from federal policymakers who were considering legislation to strengthen intellectual property protection and increase penalties for technology theft. I was invited to testify before congressional committees, participate in regulatory discussions, and contribute to policy development initiatives focused on protecting innovation and supporting legitimate research and development. As I reflected on the 7 years that had passed since David and Amanda's conspiracy first began, I marveled at how their criminal behavior had ultimately led to outcomes they never could have anticipated.